My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about external variables that influence what you thought of your partner and how when it changes later on, then you fall squarely into the disillusionment phase. And humorously, I had already recorded my subscriber episode, the one that's going to come out next, which is why your wife may take deaths harder than you expect. And during that, I came up with the idea to do this episode, but then I realized I had to switch the order of the episodes because I wasn't ready for subscriber one. So you'll hear that subscriber episode next. Hopefully you do subscribe. Click on the link to subscribe, and then you'll hear me say, oh, I should do a podcast about that idea. And that's this one. So you're hearing this. It's like, it's like a Back to the Future. Okay, so anyway, what do I mean? Because obviously there's really no good way to summarize this idea without examples. So I'll give you some examples. Frequently, people do not understand that they're getting their needs met from a lot of different people, places, things, activities, etc. So the average person in their 20s has lots of friends, more than they'll ever have again. They have lots of exciting things happening. They have job, they have hobbies, things like that. And they're very close to their family. Often, again, everything, they've just been a child, like they've just turned into their first decade that they're not living at home. So they're not married, they don't have kids, so they have a lot of shit going on. And this is when most people meet. And even if you meet in your 30s, you're still at the same place, kind of, because you didn't get married and have kids. So the social life, the job, all of these things are like super important because you don't have anything that's even more important, aka spouse and kids. So I've seen this happen so many times that I thought I would make a podcast about it to help people understand themselves better, which is always my goal here, and to help you understand your spouse better and to not blame your spouse and to see things from a wider lens and all this mishigas. Mishigas is it's Yiddish for garbage, I think. But anyway, all of this stuff, like, et cetera, et cetera. And so here's an example that I see all the time. A woman was dating multiple men, not bad, not like cheating, just she was dating a bunch of guys because she was dating. And everybody, like nobody was monogamous. She was like dating this guy, she'd talking to that guy, she would go out on a date sometimes with this guy, she'd hook up sometimes with that guy. And nobody was asking her to be the girlfriend yet. It was like all this young stuff where you're just having fun. And then, things got more serious with one of the guys. She ends up marrying him. And then she realizes later that he is kind of not that interesting. She thought he was interesting. Of course, there's honeymoon stage, but there's also other variables called a lot of those other guys may have been more interesting to her. And she was conflating. Like she felt like generally that she had like interesting flirtatious interactions with men. And so the guy that she ended up picking, she kind of almost, he got the spillover, like it's like a halo effect, she felt very, interested and engaged in conversations in general. So she kind of assumed that those conversations were ones with him also, It's like if you have a good day with like all of your kids, like I have 3 kids. If you have like a good day with all of them, you take everybody out to like a festival or something, you don't really sit there and be like, well, you know what, one of them really did not contribute that much, One of them was really just sitting there and not really being a team player, unless it's like terrible. But if one kid is just more quiet, you don't really even know. You're just like, oh, we had such a good day. All of us were joking around. No, yeah, all of us except one, but like you don't really, it doesn't hit the level that you would really parcel that out in your own mind. It's kind of like a group effect. It's a main effect. So she ends up with this guy and then she's like, you know what? We don't even joke around. Like he doesn't have much of a sense of humor. but like she was like in a very cheerful, positive headspace. And when she interacted with him and met him, she was having engaging, humorous interactions with other men. So it was just part of her like worldview that was happening. And she didn't really, think that it really wasn't with him, honestly. And I've seen this happen a lot with guys with sex. So they were sleeping with a bunch of women and they were having great sex, like all over, like, writ large, they were having good sex. Then they end up with the one who's boring. And it didn't seem to matter, kind of. It's like they were having really good sex with a whole bunch of girls randomly here, there, everywhere. But they kept talking to this one who's such a sweet girl and then really wife material. And then at some point, he clicked over into being in love with her. So he stopped sleeping with the other girls. This is not a world in which I'm saying that people were cheating, because I don't often see that. And then it's almost, then they get married kind of quick after that, because were talking for a while. All the while he was having casual sex with other people. And probably so was she, but maybe not, because men do that more. And that's reality. Those are the numbers. And point is, it's like he was listening to some fun music, and then all of a sudden the music stopped. And he's like, oh, someone's like, I haven't had really good sex in a long time. Why is that? Oh, I think it's because I'm with her. And, she was never really that into sex. It was just like, it was like she was good as like one thing in a buffet. But if that's the meal that you're having every day, then maybe you would have reconsidered it, and it's the same thing as the woman with the man that can't make conversation. If he's part of all of her suitors, great, he has a lot of winning qualities. But if she had to pick, like the hypothetical thing that children ask, or whoever, if you had to have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be? And this isn't this meal is not what you would pick. And it's funny, but it's not funny. I'm saying it in a funny way. But when people realize it, they don't usually realize this until we go back and I'm like, what else was going on at that time that you were in your courtship? And they're like, oh, well, actually, in addition to Joe, I was dating Bo and Lo and, Zoe. And I guess Zoe is the one who really made me laugh, So, or like the same thing with the men with the sex. Also, there is a lot of other ways that this can manifest. So, for example, and this is the one that I said in the 2 days from now subscriber episode, the man had a fulfilling intellectual career and then he retires. And he realizes he and his wife have like no intellectual connection. But it didn't matter because he was always getting his need for intellectual discussion met at work. So it like didn't occur to him kind of that she didn't really have that capacity. And now he's home all the time. He's wanting to talk. And it's like she doesn't really talk about stuff like what he finds interesting. And this happens a lot with women. And I talk about this also in the episode with emotional closeness. There's a lot of women who get a lot of emotional closeness from their family. For like a woman who talks to her mom multiple times a day, or who has lunch with her dad once a week and she's texting with him all the time. If that person dies, then all of a sudden they realize that was the primary attachment figure. It wasn't the partner. The man is emotionally avoidant, in this situation. He doesn't really have much of an emotional capacity. And the woman like never realized it because for her whole life, her primary emotional attachment figure was a parent. And sometimes the parent doesn't have to die for this to happen. Sometimes there's a fight with the parent, or sometimes the parent moves and they don't hang out as much. The parent moves to be near the sibling with kids or whatever. So, and then there's just regular friends. So sometimes you're very, very close to a friend. And then when that friend moves or gets busy or, something, you're not as close to them anymore, you realize how much your day-to-day life was shaped by the relationship with that person and the support that it provided. In the absence of that, your partner does not seem to have the capacity to fill it. And you never really realized it before because you were never relying on your partner wholly to provide it. So what am I saying? Am I saying that obviously people should not have multiple attachment sources in their life? No, of course not. Of course, you should be close to as many people as you can, be friends and family and have compelling careers and all sorts of things. And then the other one I wanted to mention is this happens a lot of times when the kids grow up. So like, for example, a dad was spending so much time hanging out with, like, let's say taking his son to sporting events and this, that, the other. He didn't realize that was like every weekend for hours and hours, and that he and his wife like don't hang out. And then the son goes to college and the dad is like, oh my God, I don't have a close relationship with anybody in this house. I didn't even realize it, And so you got to think really about what your expectations are and whether your spouse was ever this person, because sometimes people blame. So like women will blame the man for not being as funny or interesting as he never was, or the guy will blame the woman for not being as sexually interesting as she never was, or as intellectually interesting as she never was, or she'll blame him for not being as emotional as she never was, but they're not saying the never was part. They're acting like they're cherry picking the couple of times that it was good with that person in that area and being like, oh, why can't you go back to that? Because you know what? That wasn't the norm. The norm was that you had other things in your life that were filling these needs. And now for whatever reason you don't, or you've turned to interrogate the relationship more closely as you get older and you're thinking about these things more. And you realize that this person, it's uncomfortable to think that you were a bad picker. So instead it's better to blame the person. But the reality is most people do not change that much. As much as I talk about the honeymoon stage, the honeymoon stage, yes, you're drunk on new love, but people are not a totally different human being. Like you could think the guy's a little bit funnier, but you know the difference between if he's funny and if he's not funny in your heart of hearts. But it kind of really doesn't matter when you're talking to a lot of funny people and when you're not anymore, because your life constricts, because you're not dating, you're not getting out there, you got young kids, your life is pretty boring. Then Mr. Boring looks very boring. And if you're not sleeping with other women, Miss Boring looks even more boring. So what do people do at these times? This is when you got to learn to love the person you're actually with, who you may not even know. Because you plunge right from the honeymoon stage into the disillusionment stage. And then the person, you're seeing them as even worse than they are. You're seeing that because they don't have this specific trait, which they really may not, then it's like a wash, and they're completely bad. Dichotomous thinking, either all good or all bad. And when people are in the disillusionment phase, they feel like this frequently. And therapy can really help you learn what is normal and healthy as an ask and what is not, where to balance your expectations with reality, and what, making sense of the entire narrative of your relationship with this person, where you were at then, where you're at now, how could you get these needs met in other ways? Sometimes women, like they'll start being a stay-at-home mom of like a baby and a toddler, and they'll have this huge uptick in their need for like interesting conversation from the guy. Well, he can't do that, like he was never great at it, but he certainly cannot do 100% of what you need. So that's at the time that some women are like, well, shit, maybe I have to rejigger my life here so that I have some interesting conversations with other adults. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a stay-at-home mom of a baby and a toddler, etc. So individual therapy, whenever there's an issue where you're like, oh my God, this is the wrong person for me, I always encourage individual therapy first. And then you could do couples therapy later, because the couples therapy at least give the person a chance, man. Like if you're struggling with the idea that they're totally a bad fit for you and like completely, and they always were, A, that's shitty for them to hear. And B, like then you have an elephant in the room, almost a secret in your couples counseling if you don't come out and say it, and it's cruel to say it. So figure out where you're at individually in individual work. I mean, some people do say, well, I married the wrong person. I mean, there are people who think that, and that ends up being what happens and they separate. But often people just have to figure out what this relationship is going to look like after understanding that they misapprehended, kind of core components of what was going on for myriad reasons, some of which are these other external factors that I'm discussing today. So if this spoke to you, I'm encouraging individual therapy first to figure out kind of what was going on and get your head straight even before couples counseling. Couples counseling works best when both people truly feel like they were in love. Sometimes people go into this point in the situation I'm talking about where they're like, man, did I ever know this person? Was I ever really in love with them? And at that point, that's something for you to figure out yourself. Nobody needs to sit there while you figure out if you were ever really in love with them. That's nasty. It's rude. But you don't mean it to be. You mean it to be like authentic or whatever we're supposed to be now. But it ends up being mean. So figure it out individually. And then couples counseling can come after that. All right, I'll talk to y'all soon. Hope you enjoyed this. And please do subscribe. Then you'll hear the subscriber episode in 2 days where this was birthed.